Hello, everybody. Welcome, ASPET members. My name is Melissa Houston, and I am the meetings director at ASPET. I want to thank you for joining us for the ASPET Focus on Pharmacology series, where today we welcome the ASPET Mentoring Network, who will help us focus on microaggressions, how to recognize, respond to, and minimize them. We especially want to thank our sponsor, the Burroughs Wellcome Fund. You can learn more about their Innovation and Regulatory Science Awards at the link here. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. You will note that all attendees are on listen-only mode. Some of you have already found the chat function where you can send messages to other attendees. Be sure to select the correct recipient option above where you type your message. There are options for both chatting with panelists and chatting with attendees. If you have any questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of the Zoom window on a desktop or the top of a tablet. You can submit questions throughout the presentation, and you can even choose to submit them anonymously. While in the Q&A area, you can vote for the questions you most want answered by clicking on the thumbs up icon. The little number tells you how many other people also want this answered. By attending this session, you consent to ASPET's Code of Conduct and to having your questions and chat recorded. A recording of today's session will be made available to ASPET members next week in the ASPET Connect library in the Focus on Pharmacology community, which is also where you can find the recordings from our past sessions. At the conclusion of the webinar, we welcome everyone to continue the discussion in ASPET Connect. If you already have ASPET Connect open, the discussion will be in your browser when you close the webinar. Also, you will receive a survey link that should only take about 2 minutes to complete. We look forward to your feedback. All right, so let's begin. I will now turn things over to the session's facilitators as we focus on pharmacology. Dr. Ingram, I invite you to unmute yourself and turn on your video.
Okay, hello and welcome to everyone to the session on microaggressions hosted by the ASPET Mentoring Network. My name is Susan Ingram. I'm currently the director of the network. And we found that with the canceling of the ASPET meeting, we were very disappointed that our typical program wasn't going to run. But we are delighted to be able to continue this program in the virtual setting. There's a lot more information about the network on the ASPET website. And I encourage you to look and watch for the announcement for applications for the 2021 and 2022 ASPET Mentoring Network. So the structure of today will be a short presentation by Dr. Martha Davia Garcia from Howard University. And then we'll do a panel discussion with Dr. Davia Garcia, Dr. Manoj Pusanvidu from the University of Michigan, and myself. So we're hoping and really would love everybody to actually take advantage of the question and answer throughout the entire talk. Put in your questions so that we can really focus the discussion at the end for the panel discussion. And we are also, because it's sort of a small group, we're going to really try to allow people, if they have instances or examples of microaggressions that they'd like to share with a group, we're going to actually have you raise your hand after the presentation, and we'll call on people because we'd really like people to tell us what they experience and also contribute to the discussion. But because it's a webinar, you're going to have to raise your hand or use the raise the hand function. And then we will call on you and allow you to be unmuted so that you can speak. But we feel that this would really help the discussion and try to come up with more strategies to deal with microaggressions. So to get started, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Davia Garcia, who is an associate professor in pharmacology at Howard University. Dr. Davia Garcia has over 30 years of experience as both a neuroscientist and as a neuropharmacologist studying the effects of nicotine in brain and peripheral systems. She's made discoveries revealing how nicotinic acetylcholine receptors are regulated in abuse and dependence pathways as well as in peripheral systems. So among her many activities, she is a member of several scientific organizations, including the Society for Neuroscience, the Society of Neuroscientists of Africa, the American, and of course, ASPET. Within ASPET, she's on the executive committee for the neuroscience division, and she's been a member of the mentoring and career development committee for several years. She actually has some leadership positions in the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, otherwise known as SACNAS. And she is in the executive leadership of World Women in Neurosciences. So besides her love of research, Dr. Davia Garcia also immensely enjoys mentoring and helping others achieve their career goals. So without further ado, I'm just delighted that Dr. Davia Garcia is here to talk about microaggressions.
Hi, thank you so much, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody. I am very excited to speak today to you about microaggressions, how to recognize them and how to respond to and minimize them. I am also very lucky to be in the panel discussion right after my presentation with Dr. Susan Ingram and Dr. Manoj Bhusanvedu. Okay, so I'll get started. So what are microaggressions? Back in the 1970s, and I'm trying to move my slides. Slides are not moving.
Yeah, is there a pop-up that says take control?
Nope.
Or maybe next to your name?
Nope.
And just let me know and I will forward to the next slide for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So I was saying that back in the 1970s, a psychologist from Harvard, Chester Pierce, actually coined the term microaggression to describe insults and slight that had witnessed against Black people. So what he wrote was the following: these assaults to Black dignity and Black hope are incessant and cumulative. These are two very important words that we need to remember. Any single one may be gross. In fact, the major vehicle for racism in this country is offenses done to Blacks by whites in this sort of gratuitous, never-ending way. These offenses are microaggressions. Almost all Black-white racial interactions are characterized by white put-downs done in automatic, preconscious, or unconscious fashion. These many disasters accumulate. It is the sum total of multiple aggressions by whites to Blacks that has pervasive effect to the stability and peace of this world. That's what Chester Pierce wrote. And what we want to, can you get this next slide, please? So in your career, in your life, have you actually had microaggressions be part of your life? Has anybody actually done microaggressions to you? Have you done microaggressions yourself?
Okay, everybody should see a poll that's popped up. If you can answer the poll, please, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So we have about 77% have had microaggressions in their life and about 20% have not. And so sometimes it's actually difficult for us to identify what microaggressions are. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next following slides. Next slide, please. So microaggressions are very small, very intangible little comments that actually seem to be a joke. Sometimes they are innocent offenses, and on the bottom of them, at the very core of them, it's a little tiny bit of insult where people will actually react to it almost like, what did I just hear? Was that really something that he wanted to say, or was he joking about it, or should I just ignore it? Next slide, please. So let's put some examples in place. So let's say that a professor actually has an Asian student in his office, and he talks to the student. He says, "Oh, wow, you really speak English very well," not really addressing the fact that the student may actually be second or third generation American. So why why was he assuming that the student did not speak English to begin with? Those type of things are very common in academia and are very pervasive. How about a black man that is in an elevator, the door opens up, a woman comes, and immediately she clutches her bag. What is that black man in the elevator going to think, this woman is thinking about him? A woman in a meeting with all male colleagues trying to speak up, and the male colleagues just don't allow her to talk. And this is also another way in which microaggressions can actually occur. A lesbian woman being told, you don't look like you're gay. Well, what does a gay person look like? A student is told that, oh, you're so lucky. You actually, were able to come to college because of your color of your skin, because you're black. Those type of things are microaggressions. Next slide, please. So back in 2014, Harvard students actually got together and they developed a campaign called I Too Am Harvard. And that was because they were very much aware of these constant microaggressions done to them because they always felt like they did not belong at Harvard. What do people at Harvard look like? It's a diverse community. It's full of people from all walks of life, from all corners of the United States and abroad. They have a lot of international students as well. And so why do these people have to feel like they don't belong? And they actually did this campaign, and it is absolutely phenomenal. And I really would like to basically ask you to go and take a look at this. It's in my references at the very end of my presentation. It's just pictures of the types of things that people are constantly being asked about. Are you listening to rap? Why should I listen to rap? Only because I'm black? Are you assuming that all black people have to hear rap? What are you assuming about me just by looking at the color of my skin? Next slide, please. So microaggressions are actually very painful, and they have to do basically, they're insults to a group of people that are always also stereotyped. And it's discriminating to make microaggressive comments to people. It is very painful, it's disconcerting, and the problem is that it's not necessarily overt aggression towards them. It's just small, tiny, but frequent insults. Next slide. Next slide, please. Why would people that receive these microaggressions feel frustrated? Let's hear some of the comments that they actually hear. What are you? What do you mean, what am I? I'm a human being, but people tend to ask this question when they cannot when they cannot find out what the race of the person is, or where, what they think that they come from somewhere else. It doesn't seem like an insult. It doesn't seem like aggressive questioning, but to somebody that is receiving this type of questions all the time, it is very frustrating. You really don't look black. Is your hair real? You all look the same. You don't look Latino. How did you get into jail? Are these questions necessary? Are these questions actually going to make the person feel that they belong, that they are welcome, that they are being seen as what they are, human beings? Next slide, please. So the next question is, are people who complain about microaggressions being too sensitive? This is something that has been said time and time again. So I have 7% of people said yes. 69% of people say no, and about 25% of people say maybe. And I would, yes, thank you so much. Thank you. And yes, I would agree with you that if you actually hear, you know, one of these comments on any one occasion, that, you know, you may just think about it and say, ah, maybe I just heard it, you know, a little too, I'm too sensitive today, or maybe I really didn't hear exactly what he said, or I don't really know what he meant by that. But what about if you hear it on a daily basis? What if you hear it constantly? Why do you hear these things, you know, come at you from people that are not part of your immediate group, and that are not necessarily well-intended in constantly giving you this microaggressions? What do you think about that? Just think about it. I want to know what your answer is. And I would love to have a bigger discussion about this during the panel session. Next, please. So microaggressions can take a real psychological toll on these recipients, because they feel frustrated. They feel like, again, they are being targeted by these mini comments to separate them from the rest of the people where they think they belong. It can be very frustrating. It could also lead to helplessness, to anger, depression, lower work productivity, to a lot of stress, health problems, and also affect problem-solving abilities. Next, please. So they affect the work school environment, making it very hostile and less validating. It also perpetuates the stereotype of, you know, of threat. So where you actually believe that you are part of a group and everybody's judging you because of what your race is, or what your color is, or what your gender is. This can actually have a very negative impact in your confidence and your achievements. Next, please. So despite the pervasiveness and increased awareness that we all have about these microaggressions, we tend to not want to do anything about it. Sometimes we get paralyzed. We don't know exactly what happened. We don't know exactly what went on. We are not sure how to react. We don't know whether we should actually be involved or not, or what should we do if we actually do intervene. Next one, please. So many people of color, for example, are experiencing these microaggressions in academia or in their professional environments, where they actually, you know, are told that people are surprised that they are coming into a new position where they thought that somebody from their own group was going to be moving in, and now this person that is a person of color is coming in, and immediately there's an assumption that something is wrong, or there's an assumption that, you know, she got in because of because she was a minority, because she is now, you know, being put in a position because the company or the academic program is trying to fill in some of the numbers of the minorities or people of color that they need in that position, instead of really giving the person the benefit of the doubt and thinking, you know, this is a person and they could actually be very qualified to do the job that they need to do. And so that's another way to do a lot of microaggression, is always assuming that people do not belong where they are, and always assuming that they don't have the qualifications that they actually have. Next, please. So when we actually see microaggressions, we sometimes get paralyzed. And again, we do not know what to do about them. We have not thought sometimes about how to do an intervention quickly, subtly, and effectively. And so we want to first, you know, check and make sure that what we heard was right. We want to convince ourselves that, you know, maybe that didn't happen. And sometimes we want to make sure that this interaction is not part of us, that we should really stay away from it. But most of the times the problem is that when we don't participate in this type of microaggressions, we do not do anything about it. We just allow them to keep occurring. Next, please. So Dr. Wood and Dr. Harris, they're actually both working in San Diego. Some of their qualifications are at the bottom of the slide. They actually came up early this year with some recommendations as to what we can do to sort of decrease the microaggressions within our environments. One of them is, the first of them is, they're all part of a framework. It's called RAVEN. And so the first one is to redirect the conversation of the interaction. So if we actually hear somebody saying something to a person of color and we think that that is not appropriate, we should really redirect and say, I'm sorry, you know, I think the conversation is not going on the right path. Maybe we should just redirect and focus on what we are actually talking about. You know, ask probing questions such as, you know, do I really heard you say that this student is not going to be a good student just because of the color of their skin? Or are you saying that the student does not have the qualifications? I see his CV here, and, you know, there's all of these things that he has done. You know, this is the grades that I see. I don't understand, you know, why you're putting him to the side. Values clarification, always emphasize, you know, that in most organizations, especially academia and in many professional environments, they actually have a code of conduct. And so just, you know, remind people that if you actually use a microaggression against somebody else, that you should, you know, try to refrain from doing so, because it's part of the healthy environment of the organization to treat people with respect and treat people with a sense of value and not devalue anybody at all. And another thing is to emphasize your own thoughts. I always start with, I think that, you know, what you said was probably not necessary, or I think that what you said may actually be construed as something that may be, you know, a little bit of insulting. Or I think that we can actually, you know, put that thought and see why you're saying what you're saying, and make sure that, you know, we're understanding exactly what you mean by what you just said. And then the next steps, of course, are, you know, so what are we going to do about this next? I think that if you really feel that, you know, somebody got shunned, or somebody got very offended, or is very upset about something that was said to them, of course you have to empathize with them, and also tell the person that committed the microaggression, you know, to perhaps just think about what they said and maybe just apologize for what they did. There's a lot of things that you can do. These are just the framework of some of the things that people should be thinking about, especially those that receive the microaggressions on a constant basis. How are you going to respond to people? What do you want to say to them? How are you going to, you know, try to change the mind and the culture of people using you as a target for their microaggressions? And it's important because you have to have a healthy career, a healthy life, a healthy professional environment, and you need to start thinking about how to take care of yourself and how to take care of you. Next slide, please. So one of this particular article reminded me of, you know, the only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that was assumed to be Edmund Burke that said this. And it is true. Sometimes when we actually become quiet and we don't say what we think is wrong, we just let it go. We're actually being part of the problem and not part of the solution. Next, please. So are microaggressions the same as overt racism, sexism, or homophobia? And I would like you to think one as you're answering this question as to why or why not. Thank you. So the majority of you said maybe, and the truth of the matter is that when you actually have racism, sexism, or homophobia, they're pretty overt. They're actually not unconscious biases, they're biases, and they are very aggressive, and they are very much in your face about, you know, what they think about you or what they think of somebody else that is not or does not belong to your, you know, their particular group. Next slide, please. So they do have some undertones of racism. They do have some undertones of homophobia, and they could potentially also have some overtones of gender biases. But they're usually, like I said before, much more hostile than microaggressions. Can I see the next slide, please? Are microaggressions the same as implicit bias? So again, most of the PU would actually say maybe. A few of you said yes, and a few of you said no. Thank you. They actually do have also undertones of implicit bias, and the problem is that many of us, next slide please, so many of us do microaggressions because of the way that we were educated. Sometimes we hear people say different things, you know, make comments. I remember when I was growing up, my mom would always say, "Oh, that sounds Chinese, I cannot understand it." That is a microaggression, even though she never in her life was mean, nasty, or had any biases against anybody. That comment was absolutely biased. And I put her, you know, in this example because, you know, I know that I said that a couple of times when I was starting to teach, and I offended many of my students. And I really, that was the last thing on my mind, was to offend anybody. So we have to really, you know, be more conscious of our implicit biases, because we do tend to say things that even though we think are funny, or you know, we say them as jokes, or we don't mean any harm by them, we do cause people pain, and we cause people to feel that they don't belong, you know, to our own group, or to you know, the culture, the society, the academic environment where they actually are. So next slide, please. What can we do to avoid committing microaggressions? Many of you say to consciously try to recollect on what we said. Some of you now are saying, you know, to ask for forgiveness, explain why we said what we said. And these are three very good ways in which we actually can avoid committing microaggressions. But the question is actually asking how to avoid committing them. And I think that one of the most important things is to constantly try to reflect on what we say before we say them. Of course, if we say them and then we realize that we have actually offended somebody, the next best thing to do is to ask for forgiveness. And the other thing that we should do is try to explain why we said it. It's only human to err, and we're all trying our best, you know, to be the best people that we can. So, you know, we need to just learn how to do this. Next slide, please. So, Dr. Sue, who is another psychologist who has actually been working very hard on this microaggression, he has published several books. actually offers 5 suggestions as to how we can avoid basically microaggressing people ourselves. So one is to be very, constantly vigilant of our own biases and fears, to seek interaction with others. The more we learn about other people's culture, the more we learn about other people's likes and dislikes as a human being, the more we learn about other ethnicities, the more we learn about, our own likes and dislikes in a way, the more we're going to be able to interact with people in a more healthier way. Do not be defensive. People tend to be defensive of the things that they said when people come to them and say, well, that was very offensive. Try to think about what you said. Try to think about how you would react if somebody was to say something to you in that tone or in that manner, or that would try to, shunt you or exclude you from a group with different words. Be open to discussing your own attitudes, your biases, your hurts also with others. And then be an ally. Always stand up for people that, sometimes cannot defend themselves, and also for people that are constantly receiving these microaggressions. And, discrimination. I think that the more we try to learn, the more we educate ourselves in this type of interactions, the better off we're going to be to create a more welcoming and healthy environment. Next. So this is it for me. Let's stop microaggressions altogether. And thank you so much. And we're going to be moving on to our panel discussion. Thanks.
Yes, Melissa, do you want to show the that there are some references at the end, that this is being taped, so people are welcome to download it and to take a look at the actual references. And then the slide after that, I see that we have a hand up there. So before we get started on asking people to chime in, I just want to take this time to just introduce, let all of the panelists just introduce themselves again, so you know where we came from and kind of where we are in terms of mentoring and thinking about being allies, I guess. So go ahead, Manoj, why don't you start?
Hello all, I'm Manoj Puttanveeder. I am an associate professor of pharmacology at Michigan right now. In the interest of this, I grew up in India. I spent half of my life in India as probably the equivalent of a white male right here, because this was culturally. I have an MD from India, and then I moved here to get my PhD, where I am not underrepresented, but I'm still a minority and a person of color here. So it's been very interesting for me to think of this from those two perspectives as to my life back there and my life here. So I'm also the director of the Cell and Molecular Biology graduate program here at Michigan. I serve on the executive committee of Aspect Molecular Pharmacology Division, and I'm on the mentoring and career development committee with Susie and Martha. Again, this is something I really care about, and I'm very fortunate to be able to sit here and have a conversation with all of you, hopefully in the next half an hour. Thanks, Susan.
So I'm Martha. Now you can see me.
Okay, and again, so I've been involved with this Aspect Mentoring Network since it started, and I'm really pleased at how the program has developed since the very early conceptions from Lynn Wecker. And so what we would like to do now is kind of open it up, and I've seen a hand up from Akondayo, and you can totally tell me when you are unmuted how you actually pronounce your name. Manoj, can you unmute him? Are you unmuted?
Yes, so you should be able to turn on video and speak. Ekundayo-san.
Any luck?
You may need to unmute yourself and turn on your video. Do those options appear at the bottom of your screen now?
The video is
perfect.
on, it's just the microphone. Hi, Ekundayo, how are you?
Hi, Professor Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm okay, thank you.
It's good to see you again after the meeting. Yeah, and Susan, nice meeting you too. Just a quick question. I so much enjoy your topic and your talk. Thank you so much for hitting the nail on the head. But my question is this: in a situation whereby you are the receiving end of microaggression, because you have something to benefit from, probably those who think that they have advantage. For example, student to examiner. So so at that point, because there are so many options that you gave us, do you walk away from that? If you say something, won't that affect your mark? You know, other stuff. So what do you advise the student should do at that point in time, when the person who is actually giving the microaggression is the one at the advantage, is probably superior to the person who is actually requiring something from them? For example, you actually at your PhD defense, studies defense, and you experience this microaggression. Do you react at that point in time, or what do you do? Thank you.
So yes, thank you. So the question is a good one, and that's because many times we are actually in the situation where we are with a superior, and we always find that, you know, when that happens, we tend to shy away from you know, putting ourselves in the, I'm so sorry, to shy away from actually saying something. And the truth of the matter is, you know, the Raven is actually just a framework, and you can actually, you know, take one of those things that you think is the least aggressive response, if you may, and try to, you know, to practice, you know, saying it to people. I would actually go and first of all say, you know, the ask, you know, I heard you say this. Can you explain what you mean by that? I heard you say this. Is this really what you meant? Why do you think, you know, this is the case? So, you know, you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be defensive. You don't have to start an argument. You just need to be able to ask the question. And when people are, you know, bounce off, you're bouncing off, you know, their comment, and you're saying, what exactly did you say? They tend to then think about it and say, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I meant, you know, X, Y, Z, or they change their mind. Just address it right there and then. If you could pull the person aside, that's even better. But if it's in a public, you know, place where you may not see those people again, you know, say something right there and then. Especially, you know, if you're defending, or if you're, you know, in a group of colleagues, then address it there, you know, the best possible way. Again, just think about all the different tools that you have, you know, to be able to ask the question, you know, what did you mean by that?
Well, if I may just give a little bit of an example.
Yes, go ahead.
Because you know, the word is one, but we still have some peculiarity in some ethnicities. So for example, this is sometimes it's common in this part of the world, where people say that a particular ethnic group sounds to be more intelligent than the other ethnic group. So when whenever you come for probably for an examination and you perform very well, they ask you, what? Wow, you look different. You know, we don't expect such grade from such ethnicity. Those kind of words, and though it's subtle, but it means a lot. So
Yes.
so in that instance, because we have to also put into consideration culture and everything. So, but I don't know. Those are specific examples that we actually face in some part of the world. Yeah.
Manoj, why don't you address that one?
Yeah. So I first of all, I think I want to thank you, because this is not an easy conversation to have, right? It's always very it's concerning to kind of come out and talk about this. And what you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? So a lot of the reason why this is being perpetuated, and this has actually gone on for a while, is what we often call as a power differential, right? So one person has an undue influence on what the other person is doing. There are a couple of ways to think about this, right? But and it's clearly a problem, right? Because every time you have these assumptions, it's a huge hit on your view of yourself, your view of the world, right? How people see you. There are many things that we can think of doing, right? But none of them are really easy, right? And it's always a hard thing to go through. One thing, as Martha said, is to just approach it right then, right, and say, look, this is really not an appropriate thing to do, right, and you can do that without being confrontational and or adversarial, and try and explain, right, and often just asking you to explain, what do you mean, right, what do you mean by that, why are you surprised, right, or why do you think that someone who looks like me will not get good grades, right? So can you explain what you just said? If you can do that, right, and again, that's very hard, right, when you're in that moment and you get something coming at you, often you just freeze and then you just walk away, right? But if you can do it, I think that's probably a thing that you should, that would really help, right? That's not the end of it, right? So the thing is that you don't have to forget about it. You don't have to let it go, right? I mean, you can, of course, look, talk to other allies, other people who actually understand this, right? Maybe within your community, maybe outside your community, like at Aspect, for example, right? This is these are issues that are being discussed and talked about all the time, right? So maybe a possibility would be to get enough allies, maybe other faculty or other people who are in more of a position of power, who don't have this power differential, to contact this person and explain, right, that this is, there are some reports that I heard this, right, and you should just think about this, because this is creating a problem. It's not just in one-on-one interactions, it's actually changing the climate. It's actually creating not a very inclusive climate in the department, right, or in the college or whatever institution you're in. So I would, it's very hard, right, and it's kind of difficult for me to say there is a magic bullet that's going to fix it, right, because you're kind of relying on people changing behavior. But I think the way we do it is to get community to be involved and try and educate and improve, right? The community as a whole, right? Susie.
Yeah. So before we go to Martha, I want to read another scenario which is very similar, and probably your answer would actually address both of them. And so this question came in about what can we do when our superiors don't care about microaggressions. My thesis advisor frequently made microaggressions in the form of jokes about race, sex, gender identity, religion, nation of origin, reproductive status, and ability status directed at lab members. The microaggressions caused 4 lab mates to become depressed and seek psychological help. 1 lab mate quit before the end of her contract, and 2 people to decline contract renewals. I spoke to my advisor directly about these microaggressions, but he complained that I could not take a joke and that I need to be more flexible. When I went to the chair of the department with a detailed list of the microaggressions, the chair defended the advisor, saying that the advisor probably experienced microaggressions in the past, making it okay to make microaggressions at his students. So I figure it's very similar to what Akandaya was talking about. And again, when you start bringing in the power differential, it's a very hard thing to deal with. So I think I'd like to just hear, from the professor ranks, what is the best way to start to basically deal with systemic problems?
So there's three things that I'm going to say. One is, you have to educate them. You have to educate them by saying, that is a total misconception. What is your rationale for saying that? And then that's a perpetrated fallacy. Those are the kinds of things that will stop them right on their tracks. The other thing is, when you are actually involved in an environment where everybody is sort of, covering something that is so blatantly wrong, you have to go to the top. You have to go to the top. There are, in all institutions, are either ombudsmen or there are committees for you to be able to go and give them your grievance, because this is not right. And if somebody is that pervasive on doing microaggressions to so many people, and so many people have actually had to leave the environment because of them, you have to say something, and you have to say it all the way to the top. And again, grievance committees, grievance ombudsman. There's also Title IX in many organizations where you can actually go and discuss this with them, and they will give you even more tools to stop it, okay, from happening. But yes, I think that one has to stop microaggressions right where they are, and educate people. Why do you say that? What is your evidence, for that? This is just something that, has been passed over and over, and I think this is the time to stop it. This is the time to not go there anymore. We're living in a totally different environment. What you just said is just not appropriate or adequate or nice, and move on.
Okay, so overall, my hope, when we finish this this webinar, is that participants can actually leave with some strategies to deal with the microaggressions that they either experience or they witness. And we haven't really talked that much about what bystanders can do and the importance of bystanders. Would you just want to comment on how to start as a bystander to step in and stop?
You're asking me, Sue?
Either of you.
The attendees. I think I would love to hear the attendees talk, but actually it's part of the Raven, and also part of what Dr. Sue suggests to do is stop, think, and then react in the best way possible, so that you don't want a confrontation, but you definitely want to stop the verbiage. You want to stop the communication that is being nauseous, right on the tracks. So my suggestion is, take a quick look at that, Raven. There's in the references, it's very well explained. There's a lot of detail, and there's a lot of examples of how you can actually address some of these comments and microaggressions. Okay.
Can I just say thank you, Martha? So Martha's right. There are some of the elements of Raven that actually feed into this. There are also specific strategies that have been directed for bystanders, like we hear about the 3Ds, for example, right? So direct, distract, and delegate, right? So the idea is that if you see something happening, you could, depending on the power differential, depending on the circumstance, you could direct, you could command, you could say, no, this is not correct, right? So if someone is chairing a meeting and you hear someone make a comment, you can say, well, that is not appropriate, right? You need to stop it, right? As a bystander, it doesn't have to be directed against somebody. If you cannot do that, you could distract, right? You could just come up with, I don't want to say change the topic, but try and defuse a situation by explaining something or moving on, right? And then offline, try and see if you could address it. The third thing, the third D is delegate, right? So the idea is, if you feel like you cannot do it, you have to find someone who you think would be capable of doing it, right? So you need that person as an ally to do it. So there are several of these. The question is for repeated, for people who just don't take it seriously, right? I mean, if you're doing this repeatedly, how do you address it? And yes, there are institutional situations where you can do this. You can also have, there are some strategies just from this, this person called Elizabeth Lesser has this idea of take the other person out to lunch or take the other out to lunch, right? So there are these, there are methods, for example, there are 4 questions that you can ask, right? When what in your background gave you this point of view, right? And why is it that you actually believe in this? Or why is it that you're doing this? What is your concern about my background, right? I mean, what is it about my background that you don't quite understand? What do you want to ask me that you've never really had an opportunity to ask before, right? I mean, I'll explain it to you. And what do you need to really clean up the past, right? I mean, of course, there has been some situations. So if you ask, and there are situations where if you just follow that, for many people, right, that kind of clears up concepts, right? Sexual preference versus sexual orientation, right? I mean, the idea is that to be very, I guess I've talked about this, right? Sometimes questions come up, when did you decide to be gay, right? If like a heterosexual asks a question, the question back is, well, when did you decide to be heterosexual, right? I mean, so sometimes putting that in that kind of perspectives would differentiate the idea of preference versus orientation, right? So so there are methods to do it. I don't know if we have enough time to cover all of it, right? So maybe we could give some resources or something that we could provide to the students and attendees right down the line. So I just wanted to say that having a structured conversation sometimes really helps in this, right? To educate the perpetrators in some cases for microaggressors too.
I just want to say one more thing, and that's absolutely right, Manoj. I think you said two very important words. One is allies. You have to find allies for yourself. So all of these people that have actually, been the targets of the microaggressions in a specific place, in a specific lab or specific office, you have to get together as a group and, write a letter, to the provost or to the CEO of the company or to whoever is going to listen. This person is really making the environment in this particular office or in this particular lab or in this particular department so nauseous that everybody's leaving, and you don't want that. And if you want, you have to, if you feel that you cannot do it on your own, get together, make a group, make allies, and attack it that way.
Okay, so there was a comment in the chat, and I guess it just went to the panelists from Alicia, and let's see, hold on. Yeah, Kat just asked her to repost it so everybody can see it. But basically, she's talking that she's from Poland and has an accent in English, outside of, and has an accent in English. And when she's outside the academic setting, she hears, "Where are you from?" And then, "When are you going back?" Which I've heard some of my friends also say. And so, she basically deals with it by pretending to not understand that the person intended to ask, "When am I permanently going back?" and just say, "Oh, I'm going back for a 2-week vacation to visit my family," which is a great way to deflect it. But sometimes it doesn't quite point out to the person that's asking her that question that it was a little inappropriate. So again, depending on whether you'll ever see them again or whether it's a friend or a colleague, then you might want to say something a little bit more pointed of like, why did you ask me that? Because it would make them think a little bit more about the phrasing and what was their intent from that question. There's a lot about the intent versus impact which is kind of a hard concept for some people. If they assume that if they didn't intend it, then it can't possibly have done harm. It was just a joke, or it was. But when the other person continually gets those small or even not small microaggressions, there's actually damage there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back quickly. This one that we were talking about that's at the university level said that even going to AAEO was not, and the AAEO just started kicking it around to another department and stuff. So basically nothing has happened. I wish I could say that's just an anomaly for that particular university, but I find that we deal with the same thing here, and it's really frustrating. So what it's taken is more people starting to do anti-racist training on campus and increasing the overall awareness of more faculty and more administrators. And finally, they're kind of looking at that system in a little more detail. And without that, unfortunately, there's not a heck of a lot you can do, because if you can't get AEO to listen, there's a problem there. So what I would say is find mentors and support outside of your department, outside of your university. You know, the Aspect Mentoring Network is one of those places where you can find support for your career goals, and also other people who can be advocates and might even be able to step in for you at your university. I guess that's, does anybody have another comment about that?
Can I just make one comment on this? So I think that recently the NIH has opened a direct line for trainees to contact the funding agency directly, right? So, there are people at the NIH who you can bypass the whole institution. It's a bit of a nuclear option, right? Because, you would, of course, want to try everything local as much as possible to see if it'll fix right before you take it up. But the whole idea behind this was that the National Institute of Health, and I'm not sure if NSF has a line like that, but they want to understand, right? They want to make sure that many of the policies that the NIH and national academies and the larger institutions are talking about are being implemented locally, right? So that's what this helpline is for. Again, I'm not exactly sure how it progresses once it's beyond that, but at least it will be outside the institution, right? So you'll get help from outside.
Yep.
That's great. I didn't even know about that. So I'm going to look into that even a little bit more carefully. Does anyone else want to raise their hand, have a question, have a comment? I know we are getting close to time. I don't know whether we have to stop right at the hour, Melissa.
So I think our names are in the PowerPoint presentation. You can always find us in Aspect in the directory, and we will be more than happy to, have a one-on-one or a conversation with you. If there's anything that you want to speak more on a one-on-one, please, make sure that you do so. I welcome any and all questions, and I am very happy to be here with you, and if I can support you in any way, I will. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo the words, right? So we're all working towards this, right? It's very difficult. It's very apparent and very difficult, and all of us, many of us at least, know that this is an issue. There are many people, right? It's not just the three of us. There are lots of faculty, there are lots of students, there are lots of administrators who do care about this and are trying to make a change, make a difference. And even within Aspect or outside. So I would encourage you to try to find allies, right? As Martha said, and there are people, and it might take some time. It's a very hard thing to face, right? It's a very difficult thing to go through, but hopefully, with enough people, enough education, we will actually get, we will improve. I think it has to happen.
Right. So again, Kat has put on the chat the actual link to the Aspect, where should put it? The Aspect Connect to continue the discussion. So I know Martha's going to be checking that, and we can check that as well. And the references be emailed to us. It'll be on Aspect. The whole webinar will be on the Aspect website for Focus in Pharmacology. So you should be able to download the slides there and have all of the references.
And we can post the references in Aspect Connect as well. That's not a problem.
Yes. But again, thanks to Burroughs Wellcome for supporting the Aspect Mentoring Network, as well as Focus on Pharmacology. And we just are interested, and we hope to meet you at the annual meeting, hopefully in 2022, I guess, at this point. So thanks again for attending.
I just want to say a few words. This is Melissa again. Can't get my video on, but that's okay. You've seen me. I just want to personally thank you all for joining us today. A reminder to please complete the survey, which will open automatically when you close out of Zoom. And as Kat said, join us in Aspect Connect to continue the discussion in the Focus on Pharmacology community. It's a discussion tab. The recording of today's presentation will be loaded by early next week, so be sure to tell your colleagues as well. And then our next session will be on Wednesday, October 21st, as we focus on young scientist research in neuropharmacology. And then on October 30th, our Mid-Atlantic chapter will host a biotech roundtable with some really interesting COVID talks. I encourage you to check those out. They're welcoming anybody across the globe to participate with them, not just those in the Mid-Atlantic region. And then join us for part 2 of this trainee career development series that the Mentoring Network is sponsoring. That'll be on November 13th, where Matt Carter will show us how to design effective virtual science presentations. You can register for all of these in Aspect Connect. So thanks again to the Aspect Mentoring Network, to Aspect Mentoring and Career Development Committee, and to today's facilitators, Susan Minaj and Martha, and to our sponsor, the Burroughs Wellcome Fund. Have a great weekend, everybody.